Have you followed, and do you have any comment on the saga of the incredible disappearing border fence, which last fall Congress finally got off the dime. They passed, they were going to build a fence. They authorized, what was it, 700 or 800 miles of it.
Yeah.
They even appropriated some money to build some of it, which was the joker in the first one. There was no money to build it. And then under the cover of the holidays, in the dark of the night, they simply repealed it. To almost nobody paying any attention. They repealed the whole thing a couple of weeks ago. Have you followed that? Do you have any comment?
No, it just, again, but you know what? The public is watching, so it is totally amazing. And this is a war between the interests of cheap labor that obviously don't want a secure border, people that live down there that don't want illegal alien traffic coming across their land, and the rights of American workers. I don't know. Obviously the news is not all good, and there's also the environmentalists that are complaining, but I think we just have to keep fighting. You know, it's the Chamber of Commerce, I love them in many ways, and you know, I'm very reluctant to criticize business because there's enough of that going on now with John Edwards and everybody that John Edwards clones. But it is not necessarily, I don't think, in the country's economic self-interest to develop this dependency on low-skilled labor that is here illegally, that is going to be mired in poverty and is creating costs on taxpayers that is killing a lot of localities that we've seen. So, you know, it's not a happy story. All I can say is I do believe that ultimately talk radio, the internet, blogs like David's, that we will prevail.
I think the first thing to look at will be the Anchor Baby and try to revoke that decision to. And if we start by that, it will solve a huge portion.
Yes.
You know, and nobody is looking at it. You know, it should be some attorney who work on that. It shouldn't be that difficult of an issue.
I know.
It's a misinterpretation of the law.
I don't, and I'm as guilty of that as anybody else. I don't know. None of us are taking it up because there somehow is this received wisdom that it will never get changed, and I don't know why. So I can't.
You know, I have been a nurse where every infant in the intensive care units in California are Anchor Baby, and we're footing the bill.
Right.
For 3-4 months at a time at the cost of $8,000 a day. Do the math.
I know, and what really kills me is then this allows the illegal alien lobby to claim that if we deport a parent, that we are breaking families apart. No, excuse me, you are breaking your family apart. Nothing is preventing you from taking your child with you. But this becomes this huge cause célèbre. We all had, Arianos ended up, right, in the Mahoney shelter, right, sexual. It's just preposterous, and yet most of the media buys it. So you're right, it gives them extraordinary blackmail ability. And so I don't know, this is, you're going to have to ask somebody else. I wish I could answer why nobody's taking it up, but as I say, I'm just as guilty.
I try one other day in Washington DC, nobody is willing to take it on.
Yeah,
because, you know, in the US we are so politically correct. But, you know, it's an oxymoron because you can be political or correct, these are both together.
Yeah.
It's true.
Sir?
You said we need to keep fight, but I think that's more important because we dodged a huge bullet here. And having been in Washington when all this happened, and I took 2 weeks of my schedule to fight this, and a lot of people did luck. It was luck that there was a long weekend and those politicians could go back to their districts and face the wrath of the public. A lot of elements here were pure luck, and you could have had very different results under different circumstances with the same political forces. And I think that what we're not doing enough, because there will be a second round of this, and we're not reflecting enough on the lessons or what needs to be done differently in the next round. For example, a couple of years ago, before we had the immigration crisis and the climate crisis, we had the social security crisis, right? Every few years we come up with a different crisis and then we forget about it. So, throughout this process, nobody came out and said, how's this going to affect your social security crisis, when you absorb all these people into the system. That was a huge failure in terms of public education and getting people to connect the dots here. And there are many, many things, and I think we're sort of resting on our laurels, and then the next round will creep on us, and we won't be prepared, and then we can lose, because there won't be a weekend, or there won't be the circumstance we had now, and if the Democrats increase their power in Congress, the clock is already ticking.
Yeah, no, I agree, but again, I think the localities will continue to fight, because people are seeing with their own two eyes the effects of this influx of poorly educated people that are getting sucked into underclass culture. So I agree, and I do think the debate at the national level among the presidential candidates has kind of stalled out. So it is, yeah, and I don't, if they get elected, I don't know what they will do. But again, the problem is only going to get worse. So I have to assume that the public activism is going to keep up with that, and it's going to take another election cycle. But we've come very far, and I do think it may be even difficult for a Democrat to undo what Bush has done so far. I may be over-optimistic.
Since you're from around here, I noticed last summer there was a week where all 10 of the top-rated television programs in Los Angeles were for Spanish language. The top-rated newscasts in Los Angeles week in, week out is consistently Spanish language. What's your view of what seems to be the lack of assimilation going on, the cultural impact? Could California be headed to a kind of official bilingualism that's been such a disaster in Quebec, for instance?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think for one, before I take up the cultural impact, I think politically we're seeing it already. We're seeing a stronger labor movement, both in LA City Council and also in Sacramento. Schwarzenegger has scaled back a lot of his privatization plans. He's now working very closely with the Hispanic Sacramento legislators. So I think, again, I get sort of very frustrated back in New York. I've got a lot of the open borders conservatives right next door to me, and they're just got these pipe dreams about how a growing Hispanic majority means a more conservative country. It's just the opposite. They are natural Democrats. And the living wage laws that the LA Council keeps passing, it's with the support, I think, of a lot of the Hispanic lobbyists. As far as the cultural issue, as far as I'm concerned, it goes beyond language. And this is something that I don't have evidence for yet, but I do wonder at what point the really less desirable traits of a culture continue to stay behind. What about the culture of corruption and the mistrust of public life, public officials? If that is going to start affecting our culture here. Now, what the Open Borders activists will say is that by the third generation, everybody is speaking English to a certain extent, and that is true. It does look like third generation Hispanics have picked up English now, and they're living in a bicultural world, that's true. And it's certainly only working in that direction. You do not have, when you have politicians now feeling like they have to learn